Imagine a world gripped by fear, right? Where everything seems to be falling apart, and the only hope is someone who sees what everyone else misses. That's the pull, isn't it? That basic human need for secrets to come out and, order to be restored.
It really taps into something fundamental. And the sources we've been looking at, they show exactly how that feeling, that pull, actually gave birth to one of the most popular and revealing genres in literary history.
Absolutely. And this deep dive, it's not just going to be a dry history lesson. Think of it as a shortcut, really. A way to understand why detective stories work the way they do.
Yeah, how the big names shape storytelling itself, and what these mysteries deep down tell us about ourselves, about the societies that made them.
Exactly. You'll walk away with some real insights, I think, into how these stories mirror our deepest fears and maybe even our desires.
So our mission today is basically to take this pile of research, articles, you name it, covering the genre, from like gaslit streets all the way to modern psychological twists, and pull out the really key nuggets for you. So what actually sparked this whole obsession in the first place?
That's the big question, isn't it? Where did the idea even come from? What was the spark?
Well, the sources seem to agree it points to a very specific time and place. Think mid-19th century, rapid urbanization, especially big cities like Paris, London.
Ah, the Industrial Revolution changing everything.
Totally. Huge populations moving into cities, crowded, anonymous.
More people, more anonymity, and I guess, sadly, new kinds of crime.
Precisely. Old community ties started breaking down. Crime got more complex, harder to figure out. And this created a real desperate need for some kind of new authority. That's where you see organized police forces developing, and crucially for us, the figure of the professional detective.
Okay, so the detective story is kind of a direct response, culturally speaking, to the chaos and maybe the anxiety of that new modern city life.
That's a really key insight from the research, yeah. The detective wasn't just solving crimes. They were like a symbol of reason trying to impose order on all that urban chaos.
The symbol of logic against the messiness.
Exactly. And you can see hints of this earlier, like in William Godwin's novel, Caleb Williams, from way back in 1794. It touched on themes like wrongful accusation, the hunt for justice.
Interesting. But the real-world roots, they seem tied to this incredible figure, Vidocq. Eugène-François Vidocq. Wasn't he a criminal who became a police chief?
Vidocq is fascinating, yeah. He was a known criminal in France, apparently a master of disguise, who then used all those skills to head up this new plainclothes police unit in Paris, the Sûreté, around 1811. And then he went and founded the world's first private detective agency.
Wow, using criminals to catch criminals. That's audacious.
Absolutely. But the key thing for our deep dive is that Vidocq published these memoirs, heavily dramatized, of course. And these stories brought real-life crime fighting, the investigation, the detection, into a literary form. They really influenced the writers who came later, showed the public this intriguing new figure working behind the scenes.
Okay, so we've got the social context, the need for order, this real-life inspiration, but the sources all seem to point to Edgar Allan Poe as the guy who really started the literary genre. What did he do in 1841 that was so pivotal?
Right, Poe's The Murders in the Rue Morgue,
Yeah.
1841. That's pretty much seen as the blueprint. It introduced C. Auguste Dupin.
Dupin. He's the first archetype, right? The super analytical detective.
He's the first and arguably the most important, yeah. The one who uses ratiocination.
Ratiocination, right.
Poe's genius was shifting the focus, not just what happened, but how you figure it out. Using that ratiocination, basically, superior analytical thinking. The crime itself in Rue Morgue was baffling, brutal murders, locked room, weird clues. Dupin had to use pure logic, observation, deduction.
And boom, right there at the start, Poe invents the whole locked room mystery subgenre.
He did. And what's maybe even more interesting is, while he's setting up this logical framework, Poe immediately messes with expectations. The killer turns out to be an orangutan.
An orangutan.
Seriously, it wasn't just a plot twist. It kind of challenged the whole idea of fair play with the reader from day one. It showed the genre could be logical, sure, but also completely wild and unpredictable.
That mix, intricate logic, but also shocking surprises. It's baked into the genre's DNA from the very beginning.
You got it. So Poe kicks things off in America, and then the idea really takes off, spreads across the Atlantic.
To France, you mentioned.
Yeah, with Émile Gaboriau, he created Monsieur Lecoq, brought in more realism, police procedures, a bit more science into French detective stories.
And then England?
Wilkie Collins and the Moonstone.
Ah, the Moonstone. The sources call that one revolutionary. Why?
Well, published in 1868, it's often called the first great English detective novel. What made it revolutionary was how it was told. Unlike Poe's single viewpoint, Collins used multiple narrators.
Oh, right. Diaries, letters, different characters telling their side.
Exactly. So you get the mystery through these fragmented, sometimes conflicting accounts. It adds layers of complexity, shows how personal bias and, limited perspectives can hide the truth. It took the detective story beyond just a puzzle, explored the human side of it all.
It's fascinating how you can see the building blocks being put in place. Vidoc's real-life stuff, Poe's archetype, Collins' structure, Gaboriau's realism. You can still see echoes of all that today.
Absolutely. They set up the core elements. The detective, the process, the game with the reader, the way it reflects society. Authors are still playing with those elements, or breaking them, even now.
And speaking of building on things, we absolutely have to talk about the character who became, well, maybe the most famous literary figure ever, Sherlock Holmes.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And his medical background was key. He openly said Holmes's methods, that incredible observation and deduction, were based directly on his professor, Dr. Joseph Bell. Bell could apparently tell a patient's job and where they've been just by looking at them.
The original profiler, almost. Holmes first showed up in a study in Scarlet in 1887, right? But it was the short stories in the Strand magazine that made him huge.
Oh, absolutely. That serialization was brilliant strategy. It basically created the character-driven series format we still see everywhere. And the public went nuts for it. Holmes wasn't just a character. He became this massive cultural icon, like an early example of a fictional character becoming a global brand.
And the proof is that crazy story about Doyle trying to kill him off in The Final Problem.
It's incredible. The public outcry was massive. People literally wore black armbands mourning Holmes. Doyle got buried in angry letters, petitions. He basically had to bring him back in The Adventure of the Empty House. It's such an early, powerful example of the audience forcing the creator's hand.
Wow. Talk about creator versus audience. Okay,
Yeah.
so Holmes lays this massive foundation. Then the sources talk about this period called the Golden Age. What was that about?
Roughly 1920s to 1940s, mostly centered in Britain, this is where the fair play detective story really got codified.
Fair play, meaning the reader gets all the clues, supposedly. It's a game.
That was the idea. Make it an intellectual puzzle. The main format was the Whodunit, focused squarely on figuring out the killer from a closed circle of suspects. Settings were often isolated, country manors, stranded trains, remote islands, that whole closed room mystery vibe. It keeps the puzzle contained, solvable by logic alone.
And this is where the cozy mystery really thrives too, right? Less blood and gore, more puzzle.
Yes, exactly. Remember the context. Post-World War I trauma, the Great Depression. The Golden Age offered a kind of escape. These stories gave readers a predictable world where, unlike messy reality, logic won out, justice was always served. Even murder became sort of neat, a problem to be solved.
And the undisputed monarch of this era, the queen of crime, Agatha Christie.
Billions sold. She is a league of her own.
Yeah.
What the sources really emphasize is her genius in creating two totally distinct, iconic detectives. They approach crime so differently.
Hercule Poirot, the Belgian, the little gray cells.
Poirot is Golden Age logic and order personified. Meticulous, intellectual, often working with, Captain Hastings or the official police. He's urban, professional, all about symmetry and truth.
And then there's Miss Jane Marple, the sweet old lady from the village.
Complete opposite. Marple doesn't rely on logic or clues in the same way. She solves crimes through her deep, sometimes kind of cynical understanding of human nature. She sees parallels between village gossip and, murder. She's rural, amateur, uses intuition, and just knows people. Christie, using these two contrasting styles, let her explore all sorts of human motivations within that Golden Age puzzle structure. Think Murder on the Orient Express, and Then There Were None, classics.
But while England's perfecting the cozy puzzle, America is brewing up something totally different. The hard-boiled school. A rebellion.
Oh, absolutely, a conscious rebellion. Kicked off mid-1920s, often in those pulp magazines like Black Mask.
Yeah.
Raymond Chandler famously said their goal was to give murder back to the kind of people that commit it for reasons.
Not just to provide a corpse. Yeah, I remember that quote. So a direct hit against the maybe artificial feel of the Golden Age.
Exactly. They wanted grit realism.
So what were the big differences? How did it feel different?
Well, almost everything. The setting. Forget the manor house. It's the corrupt, dark, rain-soaked streets of the American city, L.A., San Francisco. The whole world feels compromised.
Yeah.
And the detective. No detached genius here. It's a flawed, cynical private investigator. often drinks too much, uses his fists, operates in this really murky moral gray area.
And the writing style is completely different too, right? Tough, short sentences, first person, you feel like you're right there in the muck.
Totally immersive in that harsh reality. And the whole moral outlook is flipped. Golden Age restores order, right? The hard-boiled world sees the system, police, politicians, the rich as fundamentally corrupt. Justice isn't about fixing the system. It's a personal, often very lonely struggle for the PI.
Sounds like a pretty sharp critique of the American dream, the shiny surface versus the ugly reality underneath.
It absolutely is. It pulls back the curtain on hypocrisy, systemic rot. The detective often lives by their own strict personal code of honor, precisely because you can't trust the official systems.
And Dashiell Hammett is the key figure here, coming from a real detective background.
Hammett's seen as originator, yeah. He'd worked for the Pinkerton Agency, so he brought that raw realism. His Sam Spade and the Maltese Falcon, that's your early anti-hero. Tough, not sentimental, but lives by that rigid personal code.
Uncompromising.
Hammett's style was very lean, stripped down. Then came Raymond Chandler, who brought a more lyrical, almost poetic style to it, really elevated the genre. Philip Marlowe is the ultimate modern knight errant, a romantic deep down maybe, but with this cynical shell, trying to stay honorable in a completely corrupt world.
Like Chandler said, down these mean streets a man must go who is not himself mean.
That idea, the personal code as the last defense when society's rotten, that's really powerful. Still resonates.
It really does. So you have these two massive streams, right? The Golden Age puzzle, the hard-boiled grit. And honestly, most detective stories you read now borrow from both in some way.
And they're huge now, commercially speaking. The numbers are staggering. Christie's billions, Simonon's millions, James Patterson, hundreds of millions. It just shows the global hunger for these stories.
It really does. That desire for answers, for justice, maybe just for grappling with darkness safely. It's universal. And George Simonon, the Maigret guy, he's a really interesting example of success through, well, innovation.
Simonon wasn't about the puzzle, was he? Not at all. Maigret doesn't really produce in that classic Golden Age way. Simonon focused on psychological depth, intuition, empathy, creating this thick atmosphere. Maigret famously solves people, not crimes. He kind of immerses himself in the suspects' worlds, tries to understand their lives, the environment that led to the crime. His huge success proved the genre could be more than just a game. It could be deep human psychology.
And then at the other end of the modern commercial scale, you have someone like James Patterson, a totally different model.
Patterson is a publishing phenomenon, pure and simple. The sources really point to his book factory method, using detailed outlines, co-authors, churning out a massive number of books.
His name is the brand, isn't it? More than any specific detective.
Precisely. It's brilliant marketing, really. You pick up a Patterson, you know you're getting a fast-paced thriller, super short chapters designed to be incredibly readable, hook you fast. He calls himself a very good storyteller, and that's the focus, relentless pace, trim anything that slows it down. Its success built on branding, sheer output, and a formula that clearly works for millions.
Okay, so moving from those giants to, say, the last 20 years or so, what are the big trends shaping the genre now? Nordic noir has been massive.
Scandinavian noir, yeah. It's known for that gloomy mood, the slow burn suspense, and often these deeply flawed detectives wrestling with their own demons. But its real punch, according to the sources, comes from its intense social critique.
Using crime to expose the darkness under the surface of those supposedly perfect Scandinavian societies?
Exactly. It tackles tough stuff, racism, misogyny, social inequality, corruption in institutions. Crime isn't just random. It's presented as a symptom of a deeper societal illness. Stieg Larsson's Millennium Trilogy with Lisbeth Salander blew this up globally, exposing violence against women, corporate sleaze. Joe Nesbitt's Harry Hole books lean more hard-boiled, lots of violence, trauma, the detective's internal struggles.
Another huge trend the sources mention is the rise of the psychological thriller. The focus shifts inward, right?
Big time. It's a move away from the external crime puzzle, or even the societal critique, and into the internal worlds of the characters. Their thoughts, their distorted views, their past traumas, and the unreliable narrator becomes a really key tool here. Think Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl.
Right, where you just don't know who or what to believe because the person telling the story might be, well, unreliable.
Exactly. It plays on modern anxieties about trust, perception, how slippery truth can be. Paula Hawkins is the girl on the train, did something similar with memory loss, trauma. It really reflects a contemporary fascination with internal damage, paranoia, psychological fragility.
And we're also seeing authors now who are just masterfully blending all these traditions, aren't we? police procedural, hard-boiled elements, deep psychology.
Oh, definitely. Look at someone like Michael Connelly with Harry Bosch. He's classic, hard-boiled, cynical, L.A. cop, strong personal code, everybody counts or nobody counts.
Right.
But working within the system, the procedural framework, or Lee Child's Jack Reacher, he's like a modern take on Chandler's wandering knight errant, dispensing justice outside the system.
And Tana French, her books feel so literary, so intense psychologically. She often uses that daisy chain thing, right? Where a minor character becomes the next book's narrator.
Yeah, and the sources suggest that structure serves a purpose for her. It really highlights how investigating these dark cases deeply affects the detectives themselves, often digging up their own past issues. And then you have Dennis Lehane, Boston writer, exploring how crime intersects with trauma, class, moral gray areas, really blends that hard-boiled social conscience with deep character psychology.
And in a lot of these modern stories, that idea of justice feels, well, a lot messier than in the Golden Age.
It's more complex, yeah.
Yeah.
In Nordic Noir, solving the case might just reveal how broken the system is without a neat resolution. In Lehane's books, the legal ending might feel morally unsatisfying. Modern detective fiction is definitely leaning into those shades of gray, reflecting the, complexities and anxieties and tough moral questions of the world we live in right now.
So let's try and pull all these threads together then. From Vidocq and Poe, through Christie and Chandler, right up to Larson and Flynn. What is it about this genre that keeps us hooked? And where does it go next?
Well, the enduring appeal, I think it comes back to that fundamental human need for order when things feel chaotic, that desire to understand the dark stuff, but from a safe distance, plus the sheer intellectual kick of solving the puzzle. And it's proven incredibly adaptable, hasn't it? Like a dynamic mirror reflecting whatever society is anxious about: justice, morality, crime, you name it.
And looking forward, how does it keep evolving?
Well, technology is bound to be huge, right? Cybercrime, AI helping or hindering detection, maybe crimes involving genetic tech. Globalization, too, we'll see more stories, more voices from different cultures, places like Japan, Turkey, adding new perspectives.
And what about the big anxieties of our time? Climate change, pandemics, social divisions.
Those will inevitably become the new landscapes for mystery, the new sources of conflict and anxiety that the genre explores. I mean, as long as humans are looking for answers and wrestling with right and wrong, detective fiction will be there, finding new ways to frame those struggles.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought to chew on. If detective fiction has always held up a mirror to its time, what new kinds of mysteries, what new moral dilemmas will it start exploring as our world keeps changing so rapidly? What will the search for justice even look like when facing tomorrow's challenges?
Definitely something to think about next time you pick up a mystery novel or watch a detective show.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the long and fascinating history of detective fiction. We really hope it's giving you some new angles, new ways to appreciate the stories you enjoy.
There's always more to uncover, that's for sure. It's a rich genre.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this deep dive and you want more explorations like this on all sorts of fascinating topics, please do follow us. And hey, if you liked it, maybe give it a like, drop a comment. We always love hearing what struck a chord with you.